For those people who don't know me, I'm Joan Hughes, President of Council on the Ageing, New South Wales. I'm really appreciative and thank you for your patience regarding the new date for this webinar. I was very unwell last week, a bit of COVID, long COVID as I'm calling it, but getting back on deck and still having a lot of rest. So I'm looking outside today and the sun is shining, so that helps to make you feel better. As you know, the webinars, for those people who have joined us on previous webinars, they're a regular program for Council on the Age in New South Wales, especially during the pandemic. And we've had some wonderful discussions from the do's and don'ts of downsizing, issues to do with health and well-being for older people. We've had sessions on finance, we've had sessions on death and dying, so a whole range of topics. But today we're actually talking about seniorpreneurs, or some people call them senior entrepreneurs, but the short version is seniorpreneurs. So they're older people who take a leap into a business and believe in maybe taking risks, taking on new challenges, often based on expanding their existing skills and always learning new skills. And there are other reasons why people decide to do this. They're unable to find work that they want to do. They've stopped working full time but want to keep a hand in. They've held a passion through their working lives, but now they want to earn some cash from it. And very importantly, they want to stay engaged in their community. So today we have some very knowledgeable speakers with us, and I encourage you to talk with us throughout the webinar this morning through the Q&A. So today we're joined by Alex, Natalie and Jan, and I thank them very much for giving them their time and rescheduling to today's date. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we are all on this morning. Today I am on Wada Wada country, and Wada Wada country is in the Kiama area. And for those of you who know Kiama, the word Kiama is derived from the Aboriginal word Kairama, which means where the sea makes a noise. And if you've visited this area, everyone knows about the blowhole. It's one of the most popular spots here. And it also means where the mountains touch the sea. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and I extend that respect to First Nations people who are joining us today. So for those of you who don't know much about Council on the Age in New South Wales, we are the peak organisation for people over 50 in New South Wales, and there's one of us in every state and territory, and there's COTA Australia as well. We are a policy and advocacy organisation. We work with politicians, with policymakers, service providers and the media to make sure the views of older people are heard and, more importantly, acted on. We also provide services for older people, including legal pathways, the Aged Care Navigator service, Living Longer, Living Stronger, Older Men, New Ideas, and the Community Speakers Program. Now, some of those services, you may not know what they mean just by the term, so you can find out more information on our website. Regarding Zoom housekeeping, so everyone except the presenters are on mute. You aren't able to unmute yourself as this is a webinar, not a meeting. You'll see a Q&A panel. You can ask your own questions at any time. And I've asked by typing into the Q&A panel, and I've asked the presenters today, they might be able to answer some of your questions as well. So we're going to make it as interactive as we can. You can also upvote someone else's question if you think they're asking something that you would like to know. We'll be answering as many questions as we can during the panel discussion. We won't get to all of them, so please bear with us and respect our patience and respect us, because sometimes they fly in and I'm trying to facilitate as well as look at the questions. So we do value your patience. There's also a chat panel where you can make a comment during the presentation, and again, try and keep your comments short and also respectful. As I mentioned to you, this event is being recorded and it will be available from tomorrow on COTA New South Wales YouTube channel, along with all our other previous webinars. So if something really attracts you today, or you think, well, that's a great idea and you'd like to share it with your friends, please feel free to share the webinar from the YouTube channel. And it's also, if you've joined us today and you think, oh, I wonder what did Jan say about that particular topic? Well, it's also good to go back to it and at your own leisure have a look at them. I'm really interested in this topic. One of our board directors decided it was something that people might like to know a little bit more about. We know that lots of older people experience ageism every day, especially when looking for paid employment. And yet we're talking about a group of people with extensive experience, with skills and work history. So losing that from the workplace or the workforce unnecessarily seems very pointless to me. We also know that many older people want to work for longer, maybe not full time, but they enjoy being in the workforce, being part of a team, the kind of social engagement that a job brings. There are also a group of older people who need to keep working for financial reasons. For, pardon me, they're not financially viable at the moment to retire, and so are working longer to bring in some more cash. And some older people are starting their own businesses, some doing the same kind of work as they've done throughout their substantive careers. Others are heading to an entirely different direction and doing something that they've wanted to try but haven't been able to do. Some people talk about the kind of flexibility that starting their own business gives them to do other things in their lives, whether that's travel, spending time with grandchildren, spending more time with friends, which sometimes as an employee doesn't necessarily allow those things to happen. So they're the issues that we're going to discuss today. As always, remember you can make comments in the chat panel and ask questions in the Q&A panel. We'll get to those, as I said, as many as we can throughout the morning. Anyway, let's get underway. It's very exciting. I'd like to introduce Alex. Alex, will you join us?
Hello, folks. I'm just getting my slides up. It'll take 1 second. There we go. I hope everybody can see that. And hello, all mostly New South Wales people. Hello from Melbourne. I believe you've got sunny skies or you've got clear skies. Well, we've got kind of clear skies here in Melbourne, but 5 minutes into my presentation, that'll probably change. So we'll see where we go. So I'm Professor Alex Moritz. I'm the Professor of Entrepreneurship at La Trobe University in Melbourne. And again, a hearty welcome to everybody from COTA. Really, thank you very much for the invitation to come talk to you today. And I'll be talking to you about research that I've done with many members of our research team aligned to different universities and associations and industries around South Africa on what we term senior entrepreneurship. So pretty interesting. And Joan, thank you for the lovely introduction. And you actually already did my entire presentation for me. So I'm just going to flip through a few things as well. Everybody this is being recorded. So, but my slides are available from COTA if anybody actually wants some backup stuff and so on. So that's all good. Very interesting, just to kick off before we get on with the main stuff, with the meat in the sandwich, is this term senior entrepreneurship or seniorpreneur. It's kind of weird. Our research actually shows that the actively engaged senior entrepreneurs, people age 50 plus that are involved in self-employment, don't like to be referred to as senior entrepreneurship. It puts a connotation onto them that they're the old folks in the room. So hence we call it mature-aged entrepreneurship. But yeah, other words also known as grey entrepreneurs, silver entrepreneurs, whatever it may be. But we're talking about people of mature age that participate in self-employment as a job option. And there are various variations of that as well. So let me then move on. But just before we do that, webinar is always an interesting thing. So I can't see any of you. Most of you are, well, I hope can see me and can see the slides. It's all free up to your participation. But I was thinking if you could possibly in the chat, very briefly, just put in the chat, what is your profession, or what job do you do, or are you self-employed? Are you retired? If you don't want to share that information, that's fine. But those that are willing to do it, just share that with us so that the rest of the close to 100 people that are in this webinar can just get a feeling of the variety of people that we have in this webinar while I go through a few things on mature-aged entrepreneurship. So let's continue. I'm not going to go through everything I've written here. I know you can all read and go through it, but I'm just going to go through some significant milestones or some significant things attributable to senior entrepreneurs. As we said, it is startup activity, in other words, self-employment for people aged 50 plus. Very interesting thing, it's a large group of people when you look Australia-wide. A third of all entrepreneurs, self-employed people in Australia are in this age bracket of 50 plus. It's the fastest growing sector of entrepreneurship, second to a new sector of entrepreneurship, which I'm going to cover in a few minutes as well. That's come as a result of COVID. It's got huge economic benefit to our economy. I've got some figures written there. Those figures are correct. But it's not only of economic value, it's of social innovation value as well. We refer to senior entrepreneurship, mature-aged entrepreneurship, whatever we want to call it, as the driver of social innovation. So in other words, it's not all about wealth creation. Entrepreneurship usually is about high growth and wealth creation. Yeah, we're talking about a lot more social aspects, and I'll go through that as I go through the presentation. If you do have any questions while I'm going, please put those in the chat as well. So very interesting, a global study, and this was of over 20,000 successful entrepreneurs done out of the States. So not only in America, but they found that the average age of a successful high growth entrepreneur is 45 years old. So that myth where you think successful entrepreneurs are 20-year-olds that are developing apps on the iPhone, that's a myth. That thing that the more mature age generation aren't tech savvy is a myth. And just while I'm at that, I actually forgot to mention this. One of our significant partners, when I say partner, research partners and engagement partners, War of Wasted Talent, they're actually on the webinar now as well. You can actually, I think there'll be a logo later on, but you can just Google War on Wasted Talent. They've got a lovely article on the myths of older workers. So it's not only attributable to senior entrepreneurs, but the myths of older workers. And it's really interesting. They've got the top 10 myths, that things people believe about older workers that are not true. Tech savvy is one of them. Mature generations are tech savvy. Mature entrepreneurs are more capable of starting a business than their younger counterparts. And there are many reasons for this. And all the things I'm giving you now are outcomes we've got from empirical research. So none of these are just mere thinking about it. This is all research and evidence-based. Some merits of getting into self-employment at this age is active aging, well-being, and this is the new term I'd like to bring in here. You can see it there, hybrid entrepreneurship. Hybrid entrepreneurship is about startup activity where you're usually in full-time employment or in paid employment, and then you do startup or self-employment as a sideline gig. There are many different words. Some people refer to it as a side hustle. So that's why we call it hybrid. Now, we see that as an enabler of entrepreneurship. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes employers, old age employers, when I say old age, people that are living in the arc ages, see it as a bad thing. It's a very good thing because it can make your employees more productive, more innovative, more proactive, more creative. And they could actually come with more creative ideas within the employer's business. So it's a good thing all around. And it's obviously very good for the testing the waters for the nascent or the wannabe entrepreneur. Just at the bottom, we are looking at applying for government funding to further accelerate the stuff. We've been doing research in senior entrepreneurship for just over a decade now. Just some very quick, let's call it highlights. As I said, a third of all entrepreneurs are senior entrepreneurs. Their senior entrepreneurs representation of male and female is slightly higher for male, and that's very aligned to generic all-age entrepreneurs as well. And there are many other reasons for that too. Just some quick facts. I've mentioned some of these already, and what we're getting at here is the significant contribution to the economy that these senior entrepreneurs do have. Don't forget that self-employment and entrepreneurship is about the creation of jobs. It's not about finding a job, it's about creating a new job and creating jobs for others as well. Most senior entrepreneurs end up employing people to run their businesses. So it's got a major economic factor to it. Never mind all the social outcomes that go with that as well. And again, it is the fastest growing sector of entrepreneurship. We don't have much research on this yet, but it appears anecdotally that hybrid entrepreneurship is going to be the fastest growing sector of entrepreneurship. We found that a lot of people that are coming out of business and want to be self-employed, and many of them are at the senior entrepreneurship age, let's say 45 plus, that often hold general management and management positions in businesses, and they're fed up with what's happened over COVID. And we as entrepreneurs say they've seen the light. We've nudged them towards running their own businesses, and many of them are participating in hybrid entrepreneurship activities. There's just some overlying characteristics from our past 10 years of research on senior entrepreneurs. There's some pluses and minuses. You may ask what I mean by risk tolerance. Well, the older that you get, the less risks you want to take. We don't have the time factor on our sides. We're not 20 years old that we have 60 years ahead of us to go and do things. Okay, so that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? We've got lower levels of entrepreneurial intentions. We're more concerned with other things rather than being involved in the startup business. And that is why that myth is that startup is a young person's game, which it isn't. The senior entrepreneurs are dominant in social entrepreneurial activities. So they're usually involved in community activities. We often use the term social enterprise. So it's not always about profit maximization, but doing better in the communities they serve. Obviously, there are many, many, many very wealthy senior entrepreneurs as well. Higher propensity to self-financing. We find that a lot of these entrepreneurs finance their own businesses. They bootstrap and that type of thing, from their pension savings and that kind of stuff. That is what we also found in our research, interestingly enough. A lot of the senior people fund their kids' startups as well. Fear of failure is less than the younger cohorts, and that's because we've got greater human capital, financial capital, and social capital, which I'll discuss a little bit later on as well. And as I said, there are many economic and social benefits to society. But what can becoming a startup or becoming self-employed do for you when you're 50 plus? Well, first of all, it can give you an active lifestyle, social inclusion. You've all heard that horrible word discrimination in the workforce, where a lot of employers don't want to employ people aged 50 plus. Well, guess what, folks? We don't have that discrimination in entrepreneurship. Younger entrepreneurs even love the older entrepreneurs because the older entrepreneurs can be mentors and they can give them advice. So that's something we don't have in senior entrepreneurship. It's really, That alone from a motivation perspective is fantastic. And another benefit of senior entrepreneurship, it can supplement your income. So it's not always about wealth maximization, but it helps to have that little bit extra for those overseas holidays and that type of thing. Just some advantages and disadvantages. I mentioned these things about human, social, and financial capital. Human capital meaning we. Here I go again with the we. We have a greater university of life. We've got life experiences. We've been around a while. Social capital, we've got better networks than the younger counterparts. Greater financial capital, not always, but usually. Probably about 62%, well, it is 62% of the senior entrepreneurs have greater financial capital than their younger counterparts. And that could be life savings, it could be investment in properties, it could be their own house that they put up as collateral as well. Okay, some of the other advantages that I got there, social connectedness, because of the networking and engagement activities associated with running your own business. Attractive work-life balance. You're usually your own boss, although when you are in those activities, you have lots of customers and stakeholders involved in your business. So you don't always entirely, although you may own the business, you're sometimes not your own boss because you're at the call of your customers. There I bring up the word hybrid entrepreneurship again. Okay, disadvantages. Okay, so there are some disadvantages at this age. I have put that age discrimination thing in there, but that's from a career span. So it may be difficult to get additional finance at an older age because I'll say, sorry, you're 70 years old. No, we're not going to fund you now. So you may have to go to non-traditional sources, such as business angels, venture capitalists, and so on. Ageism, declining health. Look, that's the way it is. We are living longer, though, so that's the positive. And risk tolerance reduces with age. That is actually a disadvantage because we don't want to take those risks. And there are risks associated with startups. And again, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. There's been a lot of media, a lot of hype, and I think, Joan, you mentioned that that's how this all came through in that when I was approached to come talk about this topic, there's a lot of hype about the senior entrepreneurship space. However, there is no specific entrepreneurship ecosystem specifically for the senior entrepreneurship market, which is strange when you think, as I mentioned, a third of all entrepreneurs are senior entrepreneurs. Anyway, that is what we are developing with our partners and with what we will be doing with the Australian Research Council by getting federal funding to implement all these initiatives. A lot of stuff on here. I'm asking the question, is entrepreneurship for you? Globally, about 10% less than 10% of people participate in self-employment. Hence, only 1 in 10 people are entrepreneurial or engage in self-employment. It's not just for everybody. There's nothing to be afraid of, but a lot of people think if you're involved and employed in a large corporate business or in a big company, well, if you're self-employed, a small business is just a small version of a big company. No, it is not. It's a lot riskier. It's got a lot of different dynamics. So network, you have to know what those dynamics are. I've listed some of the things around self-employment here. And can you see I've highlighted hybrid entrepreneurship? If you are in the fortunate position that you can participate in entrepreneurial activities while you're in paid employment, you're in a good spot because then you've got some security to back you up as well. But the other things you can do, leverage family and friends, engage a mentor, talk to other startups. One thing entrepreneurs love doing is talking about themselves. Listen to what they say. And don't forget the failure rate is high. We have a thing in entrepreneurship, learning from failure. But you want to look at mitigating that risk as well. And that's very important when it comes to not giving your life savings, but you're going to have to put some capital into starting your own business. There is question and answer section later on, and Joan is going to interact with me a little bit later on, asking a few questions. So there will be more in this space, but I am mindful of the time. Thank you again for listening, and I'll be here for the rest of the webinar as well.
Alex,
Thank
thank
you very
you. Thank you
much.
so much. Now, while Natalie's speaking, Alex, have a look at when you ask the people to tell us what, where they're at to and what they're doing. And I just captured him. So obviously we've got a lot of mature age people with us today, so that's terrific. A lot of people have retired. I did like one person said, I'm 73 and I've just become a radio DJ. She's just
Oh,
learned how to. I thought
that's
that was a
interesting.
great one. A lot of people are looking at starting their own business, are self-employed. And then there is a person from the War on Wasted Talent who's joined us as well. I think that sounds of great interest to me. And then I saw one person said, well, one good thing about being self-employed is you don't have a boss. And I'm too old to deal with bosses. I thought that was a great comment as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, Alex, we'll come back to you very soon. So
Thank you for
now,
sharing
folks,
that.
I'd like to, thanks, Alex. I'd like to introduce Natalie. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Joan. Thanks so much for having me today.
No, it's very exciting. And I meant to mention, you and I haven't met many years ago when I was starting to enter a new chapter in my life. So we look forward to your presentation today. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So what I wanted to talk about is how do you actually test out a new business idea? So I have a background in product management. So that's been, I guess, the key thread across my whole career. And I've applied it in many different ways. Next slide. So I've applied it to my product management as a product manager for lots of different types of businesses, starting right from the beginning of my career when I started out with the tech business, IBM, and worked for Yahoo, and then went on to do digital product management for the likes of Tourism Australia, and also was able to apply those same skills in how to do innovation and new product development to health as well as social enterprises like Northcott, the disability provider, as well as financial services. So it's a skill set that's been quite useful in working with lots of different industries and different types of organizations, large as well as much smaller. And I've also applied it to my own business, Full-Time Lives, which helps people transition from their midlife to the next chapter of their lives. So I guess what I wanted to share with you is how do you de-risk a business idea that you're thinking about? And I mean, when I read through the experience and the wisdom of everyone in the room that has shared it through the chat, I thought, oh my goodness, I would so love to collaborate with so many of you, because you've all got a great deep understanding of a market problem. It might be your own past experience of having some pain points with a product or a service. It could be something digital where information might need to be disseminated in a different way. Or a product can be created to serve an audience that has the same characteristics and or the same pain points. So it's being clear about who's your target audience and also what pain point you're trying to solve for them. And then the idea is that you're creating something that's repeatable and scalable if you want to turn it into a service or a product. And ideally, you also at least cover your costs, if not make it profitable. But then, you know, products and services don't always have to be for profit. So some of my social enterprise clients, Northcott, for example, it's not necessarily about the bottom line. It's about channeling and delivering services effectively, efficiently for their various different customers and their communities. So what I'd like to share with you today is an approach called design thinking. It's also called human-centered design or customer-centered design. There's lots of different terms for it, but essentially there's 5 key steps to it that you go through in order to test a business idea before you might then take it forward to launch as a business or you might iterate. Next slide. So this process is really effective in terms of thinking about what your next steps are. Because I guess the thing that underpins design thinking is experimentation. Megan, if you can just click so the graphic comes up. So the first step is to empathize, then you define the challenge, ideate, prototype that particular business or service, then you test and learn, and then you iterate. Next. So this cycle, sorry, if we can go back. So empathize is the first step. So, sorry, I didn't realize there's builds with these slides. So if we can go to the first step, empathize. So empathizing with who your target audience is. So there's lots of things that you can lean on in terms of maybe your own experience and understanding who your target markets are in terms of understanding what their education and training and history might be. And what are their goals? What are they trying to achieve? And that's a real clue as to what problem you're trying to solve for them, because if there's something that they can't do and they're really motivated to do it, then that's your key as to what problem you're trying to solve for them. And then it's also understanding, well, who are their key influences and support networks, and what are their lifestyles, aspirations, and, you know, family dependencies and life stage, all of those different factors that come into play in terms of understanding your customer. And a lot of the time when seniorpreneurs launch a business, often they've found a pain point they're trying to solve for themselves. And then they realize the more friends and colleagues they speak to, they realize, oh, I've identified a group of people who are experiencing exactly the same pain points and can't, you know, solve some of their issues around a particular aspirational goal or driver. So empathizing with your customer, and, you know, the more you understand your customer, do your research, talk to people who've got the same pain point to validate whether this is a big enough pain point to solve. Because if they're finding alternate ways to solve it, then maybe it's not really worthwhile to try and solve that pain point. So doing your customer research, empathizing with the customer, and then defining what type of characteristics they might have in common that makes it big enough for you to solve and build a business around and invest more effort and time into further testing with them. Next. And, you know, when you're doing this empathizing and research, it's often good to bring it back to you in terms of what is your sense of purpose, what gives you your ikigai or reason for being. So it's if you're going to put so much effort into it, it's really important that you're not just passionate about it, but you're also good at solving that problem, and other people value it and the world actually needs it. So that intersection of having that motivation to keep going even when times are tough, because it's not easy to run a business. So you better be invested in it emotionally, and also combine that with the world needing it and other people valuing it. Otherwise, it's really just a passion project if no one else sees the value in it or needs it. Next slide. So the next stage is to define the challenge. So what that means is, you know, making sure that you understand exactly what the pain point is that not just you, but other people in your target market are experiencing. So, you know, basically, it's really understanding, maybe if it is someone like yourself, it might be understanding what they're trying to achieve from a lifestyle perspective, that is where they're being held back. Next slide. And then the fun part, this is my favorite stage, and I often run workshops to get people in a room with lots of different experience around the idea. Either they can articulate what the pain point is, or they're people who are very good at coming up with solutions. it's really good to bring a diverse group of people who have got different understanding of the problem as well as how to solve it to come in together, because then collectively you can come up with lots of different ideas. At this point, there's no judgment. It's just getting as many different ideas as possible out there so that you can discuss it further, refine it, prioritize. Next. And then the next stage is to prototype. So this is all about reducing your risk. So by this stage, you're sifting through all the different ideas and you're playing around with what you can actually afford to invest in developing. And the less resource you put into prototyping, the better, because it just reduces your risk. So even if you take one small component of what you're trying to deliver and just test that bit out, because it means that you get quick results just from getting that market feedback with your customer base of who you're trying to target, to just make sure you're on track. And you can test different elements of it. And there's different ways of testing. You can put out like a brochure that encapsulates what is your value proposition for the product you're trying to launch. It could be having a website that basically mocks up the type of digital app or service that you're planning on delivering. So without having to invest a lot of money in the design and the development, it's just to actually test out the value proposition to see if it resonates with your target audience. Because if you've got it wrong, it can get very expensive. So it's just reducing your risk so that you can then proceed with investing in and releasing more capital and your time and effort into it. Next. And so the next slide is all about testing and learning. And this is really important. So the faster you can move towards testing and learning with actual customers who reflect who you're trying to target, the more it reduces your risk. And so based on whatever you're trying to learn, using hypothesis theory to actually validate or invalidate what you're expecting people to do and how they respond to your value proposition and the pain point that you're trying to solve for them in the way that you want to do it, the faster you can get those results, you can then refine it and keep iterating. And, come back to, maybe the core group of people who initially did the ideation session with you, because then you can really unpack exactly what went right, what do you want to continue doing, what do you want to put more effort into doing, and where you want to, I guess, abandon certain features where your customer base didn't actually respond the way you thought. Next slide. One of the things that I use is a full-time living innovation canvas. So I will share the link with COTA to distribute for anyone who's interested in using this template. And this will probably help you actually think about what you like doing to bring you back to your sense of purpose. And if you're trying to kind of delve into, well, what is it that you want, what pain point do you want to solve? What are you most connected with? And then linking that back to what others see value in what you've got to offer. That's a really important part of design thinking, of kind of making sure that you've got the capability and the interest that sustains you as the entrepreneur, but it's also linked to what does the world need from a market and social perspective. Next. And lastly, I guess feel free to reach out to me, book a time with me. I'm happy to spend some time with you just talking through your business concepts and ideas. And there's a link there that I'll also get Megan from COTA to share with you where you can book your time. Back to you, Joan.
Great, thank you very much, Natalie. Some very practical ideas for people to be able to embark on, and always having a template and writing these things down, I think is super important. We still have people telling us what they're doing now with their lives, and one of the things that I just picked up, which is something that we have talked a little bit about, is that people are never too old to learn. That old saying, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. Well, actually you can teach people new ways of seeing the world, building up their skills, their experience. And we've got lots of stories of people who've done a course and they've graduated at 60, 70, 80, and that sort of sparked them off onto a new career as well. Great. Well, our third speaker is Jan, and Jan and I have something in common. We're both previous teachers in our lives. I often say, if you can survive in a classroom, Jan, you can do most things in life, I believe. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And I agree with that. I think as I was teaching, I used to think, oh, I'm a teacher. What else could I do? And people would say, oh, teachers have great skills for so many different things, but it took a long time for me to work out what was going to be right for me. So as you just heard, my name's Jan, and I live in the inner west of Sydney. And I'll just share some brief background with you. For 32 years, I was a secondary school teacher. I majored in drama for most of those years. I also taught many years of dance, and I also taught some English. And in my final school, for about 10 years of the time that I was there, I was a head teacher. My husband is a musician, so you can probably imagine that earning a lot of money has never been our number one priority. And, you know, we've managed to live within our means, and that has enabled me to, I suppose, be able to make choice that suits me and that is not necessarily the safest option. Here we go. So in the latter part of my teaching career, and I was cleaning out my office the other day and I found this old notebook, and there's an example of a list of, you know, I get to work in the morning and I write down all the things I have to achieve, and there's an example of a day's list, some of those things not achieved, obviously. But in the latter part of my teaching career, I was often left feeling that I had more to offer. That I wasn't reaching the people who needed me most. I was working in an elite school, so that might have affected it, but I just felt like I was doing something that I knew I was good at, but there was really something missing. And I also really very much needed to find a better work-life balance. So I was in my early 50s when my dad began to deteriorate. He had a neurological degenerative condition. And as he became more and more unwell, I made my first choice down the road of changing my work life. I stepped down as head teacher in order to better fulfill the familial duties that were becoming evident. And, you know, I had to take a less responsible position so that I could depart from my job at the drop of a hat and leave someone else in my place. So when my dad was actively dying, I sat vigil with him, and I was there for a couple of weeks living by his side, and I was there when he took his last breath, as I had been with my mum, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening have either been through this sort of thing or are looking at it happening, or even making choices for themselves. But when it came time to plan my dad's funeral, I just thought, I'm going to do it myself, because I was so disenchanted by what I had experienced in the past in terms of funeral planning, funeral directors, and in particular celebrants. So that's what I did. I planned my dad's funeral and I officiated the funeral. And at the end of that service, the funeral director came to me and offered me work. And I didn't take her up on that, but I did decide, you know, got the cogs turning, and I did decide to complete a certificate in celebrancy while I continued my full-time work. And then I took a year's leave from my job. I very fortunately was able to take that year on half pay, and I established the first version of my business. This ability to take paid leave offered a real safety net. And so for the first term, because I still thought in terms of school terms, Joan, you might be able to relate to that, Took a long time to stop, actually. I set about the task of setting up my business. So I had a friend of my daughter's who was a young visual communications master's student, and I still work with her collaboratively. Well, she designed all of my branding and helped me with my business cards and my website and all of those things. And while I was doing that, I started writing all of the copy for my website. I established social media pages. I started a blog. I did some minimal advertising, and I let things begin, mostly relying on word of mouth and organic growth. And I began booking some weddings first, and then my first funeral director gave me a go, and it just built from there very steadily and very strongly. And you know, I did after that year go back to work part-time, but I only did that for a couple of terms, and then I resigned because I thought I'm making enough money that I can take that risk, and it's not going to grow unless I do it. So I'm working as a celebrant, and eventually I'm getting phone calls from people who themselves are nearing the end of life, or who had a family member who was nearing the end of life, or also a child who was living with a life-limiting condition. And I found myself doing things like ghostwriting life stories, planning funeral celebrants for people who were sitting with me, holding vigil for clients who were dying at home, and providing after-death support. And I realised that I was doing this thing called being an end-of-life doula. And I thought, you know, I'm doing this and I feel like I need some more training. I need a bit more confidence. So I found Helen Callanan and Preparing the Way. And I did some training with her, you know, in order to develop my skill and to be more confident that I was well prepared for what I was being asked to do. My affiliation with Helen and with Preparing the Way then led to a new work where I was engaged as a consultant to develop an application and course outline for a certificate in end-of-life doula services. So I worked towards getting the approval for that course to be developed through ASQA. That was another role that turned up. And then I also, my personal experience, my second daughter was stillborn, and through my affiliation with the End-of-Life Doula world, and also with SANS Australia, stillborn and newborn death support, I became a part of a pilot program to offer support to bereaved parents within the community. And I started working with SANS and Red Nose. So I worked for that pilot program for 18 months. And when ongoing funding was achieved and the government said, yes, we're going to continue this, I stood back in my role in bereavement services with them, but I was invited by Red Nose to continue working with them as the supervisor of the bereavement support workers across Australia. And I've neglected to go on to the next slide, sorry, I get excited. And so I continue working just one day a week with Red Nose, and I run a support group there for families who have experienced the sudden death of a child. I also work closely in my capacity as an end-of-life doula celebrant, bereavement support work, business development and supervision with Life Rights Holistic Funerals, which is an independent funeral company here actually based in Hurstville, but working all across New South Wales. And so I, as well as having business come directly to me through my business page and from word of mouth. I also have worked through Life Rights and SANS and Red Nose. I just clicked it twice, sorry. So I was thinking about how my life has changed as a result of starting a business as an older person. I find it difficult to think of myself as an entrepreneur because it's not about sort of, I think of entrepreneurs as making lots of money. But I do think of myself as a successful business person. So I fit in, I decided. I guess what I've achieved is that what was missing in my life when I was a teacher has been gradually being fulfilled. And my life really does have purpose. And this inspires me to keep going. So I don't ever see myself retiring as such. I see myself as offering my services in the capacity to which I'm comfortable and which suits my lifestyle. And also as long as I'm able. So as long as people are contacting me and saying, Jan, you know, can you help me? Or can I talk to you? Then I'll continue doing what I'm doing. Oh, that photo, I would never have got to walk the Camino de Santiago if I'd been a teacher. I wouldn't have been able to take that time off. And I was in business for a good few years before I went, I can leave my work for 6 weeks and know that the business will be okay and that the phone will ring again when I get home. So that's a big change. And in terms of what are my plans for the future, I'm working on the next version of my business. My new business name is A Compassionate Space, support for all life transitions. And I'm continuing to develop ideas around that. I plan to lead walks as a part of my bereavement support. I think getting into nature and moving the body is so very important. I continue to study and to learn new skills. I read an enormous amount. I have a very strong reflective practice, and I will continue to pursue my creative endeavours. So as I indicated, there are many ways to measure success. For me, it's the way that I'm living my life and the trust that I now have in myself and also in my business to provide an income which is sufficient, to have autonomy, and to have, can I say, a far healthier work-life balance. I am so much less stressed working in the area of death than I ever was being a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. That's absolutely amazing, Jan. How inspirational. My goodness. I was listening very actively to all of the things that you have done, and you seem like you're very, very much in a wonderful space, and that you've got that the balance in exploring lots of things, as well as providing such an essential service to so many people who are going through transitions. So good on you. And I like the idea that you started exploring that while you were still teaching. So it gave you that sort of, that transition period that you're putting now into practice to help other people. I think that's wonderful. And you've got such a wonderful voice. So I can hear that when people are talking with you, how calming your voice is, and it's strong but calming. So thank you so much. And what's happened during COVID? How have you been able to do some of your work during this crazy time that we're all experiencing?
A lot of my work happens online, so on Zoom, a lot of Zoom calls. I do still, there was a time where I didn't go and visit people in their homes, but I do go to visit people when I'm planning a funeral or talking to them about their lives, and as a doula. I do work at the Red Nose office, but a lot of that can be done out of doors. It's in Lilyfield at the Callum Park, So
Oh,
it's
right.
beautiful, beautiful
Lovely.
outdoor areas. So I combined some walking. The business has kept going. There was that time where you could only have 10 people at a funeral service, but we kept turning up. Yeah.
Great. That's very good to hear. I'm sure a lot of the people who have joined us today have had experiences with going to funerals via Zoom, and that's a brand new world as well, isn't it? But I think as difficult as that is, it's not the same as being there in person, but at least people can join and be part of a celebration or a ceremony of life. Okay, folks, well, that's good. Now let's just get into our questions. So for those of us who've been, well, for people out there that have been with me before on webinars, now's our time for the discussion. So I'm going to start it off by just posing a few questions to our terrific panelists. So, and I'm just checking, we've got a few things that have come through the chat. So Alex and Nat and Jan, if you see anything that you want to answer as well, you can obviously type that message, but just put your hand up and we might be able to have a discussion about it. So Alex, we'll start with you. I was doing some reading, and as I said before, I thought, how did I not know this? What I didn't know was that Colonel Sanders was 65 when he found his secret herbs and spices and started Kentucky Fried Chicken. Mr. Campbell of Campbell's Soup was 52, and then the guy who Ferdinand Porsche was 56 before he started making the super expensive cars. So there we go. From the figures I've seen, there's a steady increase of youth. Mentioned Alex, about people starting new enterprises or doing the hybrid idea I like a lot. You're obviously seeing that in your work here in Australia, but what about globally? Is it a global movement as well?
Yeah, Joan, the senior entrepreneurship phenomenon or movement is certainly a global phenomenon in both developed and it's more prevalent in undeveloped nations, let's say, such as, or not undeveloped or developing nations. A lot of the Eastern countries, India, parts of Africa and so on, where a lot of those more mature age people don't have the benefit, like age pensions and that type of thing. So they have to survive. In order to survive, they have to be self-employed. That's one part of it. More generally, we have a slightly higher rate of self-employment for people aged 50 than most of the other developed nations in the world. But that aligns with our entrepreneurial spirit as well. So Australia and New Zealand are generally regarded as high in the entrepreneurship stakes, although we are not regarded that highly when it comes to wealth creation. So we're more about the laid-back lifestyle, that type of thing. Lifestyle entrepreneurs is another term that I often use.
Right.
So
but you did mention that was it close to $12 billion?
Yes.
That goes towards the Australian economy. That seems very substantial to me. That's a good thing because people are employing other people. But Alex, someone's just put on the chat here, from your stats, what is meant by 398k startups, 40k?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that it represents 300,000 startups by magnitude. Those are the number of businesses. However, an interesting thing, I want to add another buzzword. Another interesting thing is 20% of the senior entrepreneurs in Australia that we surveyed thousands of people, actually create multiple startups. So we call them habitual entrepreneurs. The other word we use for those types of entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs. So these are entrepreneurs that have 3, 4, 5 startups going at the same time. We've actually got one of those people he's been in the chat. I don't want to identify him.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, but so they're all around us. And these people they cannot help themselves but start new businesses the whole time. Some are successful, some aren't, some are in high growth, some are in social. What most of these people do, they've got a few businesses in Australia, they've got a business here, they've got a business there, all over the show. So they're global agents.
My goodness. Well,
It's very good as well.
Jan, someone has just said you are a great example of the hybrid. We've got all of these terms floating around. Who would have
Oh,
thought
there you go.
we've got a new language with entrepreneurship. That's terrific. And in a way, Jan, you're also an example of someone, not that you've got many startups, but within your new business model, your new business, you've done many things as you've come across opportunities or people have sought your support for something else. So you've gone off and done training. But importantly, you've obviously got good networks.
Yeah, I do have good networks, but I think that that's happened organically, that it's been me, and I suppose Natalie was talking about, what's the challenge, what's the problem, it's often been about what do I need, and then having the confidence to search it out. And I think one of the things that I learned as a teacher was that it's really important to have a growth mindset and to really understand that if I don't know something, it's just that I haven't learned it yet. And there's someone out there who has that skill, and it's about having the confidence to go, can I ask a question? Or can I talk to you? So for example, when I was first looking to move into a different sort of funeral celebrancy, I've done some work for some of the more traditional funeral directors. I found a website that I loved, and I just sent an email to this funeral director and I said, I love what you're doing and the way you represent yourself, and gee, it would be wonderful to talk to you sometimes. And I'd had so many knockbacks from other people, but this person was instantly, email back, let's have coffee. This is where I am, come and talk. I'd love to talk to you. And it was that just not taking the knockbacks. And I do hear a lot of people who try to get into the funeral celebrancy business who say, I can't get my first go. But it's about that persistence and thinking, well, they don't need me, but there's someone who does, and keeping on. So it's resilience, it's growth mindset, and I think that along the way I've done a lot of personal growth and self-reflection and therapy, all of those things to help me to be comfortable in myself and be able to know that I've got something to offer.
Yes, and just on a personal note, we've made a commitment in our family that we, subject to their approval, of course, and the conversations we have before people die, but we run our own family funerals, and we've getting more experienced at it. And I have a double tier gene in my family, so all of my family and friends, there's no way you're going to be able to do it because you'll cry through the whole thing. Well, I do cry when I start, but then I've centered myself, and then it, the courage comes and the commitment comes. But I think it's everyone has said it's so much more personal than going through a traditional funeral person. Now, Natalie, over to you. Now, your work that you've shared with us, which was terrific and very practical, focuses on full-time lives. The idea that in post-retirement, there are a number of ways to approach work and life to find true happiness and fulfillment as we age. Do you think this is a contributing factor for people to start their own businesses at a later age?
Definitely. I was just doing some polishing up my book manuscripts that I've been working on, and just going back and having a look at the book on the happiness U-curve. And what happens is midlife, that's when people probably the least happy. But then as they get older, that realization that just really honing in on exactly what makes them happy and really focusing on what matters to them and really wanting to make the most, contribute and do the best that they can to work on the things that are important and where they're valued and where they can kind of make the biggest difference. So I definitely think that life stage of kind of having done all the self-reflection and being really clear about what matters, and being confident, like coming back to what Jan was saying, and really not necessarily being afraid of the knockbacks and being resilient enough, and having even just a handful of people in your support network who are backing you up in terms of your journey of wanting to explore and just test it out in terms of seeing whether this is the right thing for you.
Jen, someone has just asked a question about, do you have any employees?
Pay an accountant, and I work with my designer, who I recently married, as in I performed the marriage.
Oh,
yes,
lovely.
So no, I don't have any employees, but I do work collaboratively in terms of sometimes I have someone who needs my services and I'm not available, or I'm, I might be already booked, or I'm traveling away. So I do have a network of people that I share that work with, who I feel comfortable to recommend in my place. So not aiming to have employees either, but yeah.
So Jen, there's one thing that has come through the Q&A, and just listening to you speak, you seem to be very confident. So I suppose my question is, when you were developing these new skills and learning new information and embarking on something completely different, however, there are certain skills that that you've carried throughout your teaching career into this new career or careers. And obviously confidence does play a role. And do you think as we get older, we become more confident? Have you become more confident? Or some older people will tell us through COTA New South Wales that they've become less confident because their world has shrunk.
I think that it's not an easy question to answer in a way. As I've grown older, and this started, probably in my 30s, I realized that the more I know, the more I know I don't know, so to speak. But again, I haven't let that hold me back. Yes, I am confident, but I've also had moments where I felt like I've had imposter syndrome. It's like, oh my God, who made me in charge of this, or who gave me the right to do this? And it always has to come back to, I recognize the trust that other people place in me, and I allow myself to believe that. So if I'm ever feeling that my confidence is waning, or I'm wondering, oh, am I okay to do this? Then I allow someone else to share with me their confidence. So for example, when I was invited to work as a supervisor of people working in bereavement support, I questioned whether I was suitably qualified. And I spoke to the CEO at Red Nose, and I spoke to my own therapist, who I've sort of I don't see all the time, but I talk with, because working in the area that I'm in, I do need to sort of talk things through and make sure that I don't carry too much myself. And to have both of them say to me, Jan, we trust you completely in this, and you are qualified, and you do have the life experience and the knowledge and the understanding and the skills and so on, then I've allowed that to, I suppose I've allowed myself to believe it.
Good
Sometimes
point.
that's the hardest thing.
It is.
Because we have those voices going, oh yeah, how do you know?
Even when we get older, we just think self-belief is still strong amongst our life experience, especially embarking on new things.
Absolutely, and that's where having support from others is really important.
It's
and I think
essential.
Natalie had mentioned that in her presentation as well.
So. Alex, just back to you. There's a question that's come through. I mean, you talked a lot about why older people are maybe more successful. They are more successful than younger people in enterprises. But there's a question that's come through about is there support? I mean, Natalie, obviously, there's a range of supports that you give people, but is there an organisation, or are there people that can support a senior entrepreneur
Um,
that you know of?
yes and no. Okay, so there's no specific entrepreneurship ecosystem. An entrepreneurship ecosystem means an ecosystem designed specifically for that group. So there isn't such a thing in Australia. However, there are a lot of agents, there are a lot of mentors, consultants, and so on in this space. But there's no unified body that purely addresses this. Remember, we don't have that discrimination as a parent in entrepreneurship. Hence, there are a lot of places that offer these services to all entrepreneurs.
Okay.
We sometimes call it minority entrepreneurs, such as female entrepreneurs, hybrid entrepreneurs, indigenous entrepreneurship. Senior entrepreneurship is one of those. So they embrace and they welcome all types of entrepreneurs. There are a lot of accelerators. Nearly 95% of Australian universities have accelerators that they allow their communities to come in and engage in. So if you've got any affiliation to those, your nearby university, most universities will embrace and take you on to join their accelerators. They're not that formal, where you can come and learn the tricks of the trade, mix with like-minded people. So the main thing is to see if you can find a mentor. There's a lot of free online support available. Every single state has a government-funded start-up or small business facility. Search that out, just Google it out, and there's a lot of free seminars and free information. The one in Victoria, for example, is LaunchVic.
Okay.
Or Startup Victoria. Every single state has a lot of those as well. So there are a lot of networks that do that. We are developing that specific one for senior entrepreneurship. And there are, I mentioned, like Warren Waste of Talent that specialize in this area. They're the custodians of the seniorpreneur brand. But they do wider stuff in all types of employment for mature aged people. So the thing is, there's a lot of free source information online. And as I said, senior entrepreneurs or aspiring senior entrepreneurs are tech savvy. They know how to go through a computer. If you're not that tech savvy, there are a lot of other people that you can ask to help to do that. Yeah.
I think that's an important message. And Natalie, you mentioned something in the chat about accelerators. Yeah. I've never heard of that term, accelerators. That's fabulous.
A few years ago, I mentored a whole lot of startup entrepreneurs through Telstra's Miri D Accelerator program. So unfortunately, it's no longer being supported by Telstra anymore. But as Alex said, there are lots of those sorts of programs that are out there where there's a combination of access to mentor networks, entrepreneurs wanting to support early startup entrepreneurs, as well as investment in, I guess, taking you through a formal program and getting coaching. So what I was doing was, in my role as a entrepreneur in residence for that program, was I was offering my product management skills to that cohort of 10 startup entrepreneurs. So even though that Telstra Miri D program's not around, there are others around there. And then there's kind of more informal types of accelerator programs. And you don't necessarily need to follow a formal structure. Like if you are tapped into groups of people who really understand a combination of the market problem, and then also some people who've got business skills, kind of having that informal support group is almost just as important as understanding what is the process to build a business, and that process that I talked about, design thinking. Because there's also people who don't necessarily want to start their own business, but want to contribute their skills and support entrepreneurs. So, because it's quite daunting, it's a big commitment. So there's also tapping into and partnering and two-way mentorship with people who are really happy to offer their expertise in how to, but don't necessarily want to do the hands-on work, and just kind of reaching out to people who might have the experience in different areas that, and like what Jan was saying, is just really being comfortable with asking those questions and having that beginner's mindset to just constantly ask questions from your network. And if someone in your network doesn't have the answers, often you just ask, well, do you know who else you could introduce me to? And usually once people pick up on the passion you have to solve a market problem or a social problem, the floodgates open. In fact, sometimes you just have to kind of hold back and go, no, I'm at development stage. I've really got to go focus at this stage in terms of what I'm trying to deliver. No more introductions for the time being. Wait till I get over this hump.
Yes.
So, but it's, you know, it's about putting it out there, and, you know, and the community, once you tap into the right communities of people who want to back you, not just financially, but in terms of getting your idea out there and testing it and helping you review things, give you feedback. Before you know it, you're well and truly on the way.
Mm-hmm. And just stay with me, Natalie. Do you see any risk where people, you mentioned in that diagram that had the circles and the person in the middle, about the importance of feeling passionate about something, and it could have been a hobby. Do you find, and is there anything you could share with us about then you turn that into a paid work or into a business? Do you lose some of that along the way?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why using that iterative approach, just
Mm-hmm.
even for yourself, not just testing it with the market, it's good for testing it against whether that's really the path that you want to go down. Is a good way to just confirm, like, do I want to keep it as a passion or a hobby and not put that extra pressure on myself to make it all of a sudden a, you know, profitable business? There is a difference. And so, yeah, that concept of Ikigai, it doesn't always have to be about paid work. Sometimes it's good to just know, well, this is something I really want to keep doing, keep learning. It's something that I don't necessarily want to have as something I do all day, every day. You know, that's just too much for me. I don't want that. So it's being clear about what's the purpose of turning your interests and your skills into that next chapter.
And for you, Jan, does, you know, not having that, you said your life's not about money in a sense. Your life is about purpose now and being able to help people transition through different stages of their life. I think someone came through, you don't miss that regular salary, the regular teaching salary.
Look, sometimes I have those moments where I think, oh, imagine how much I'd have in superannuation now if I had been earning that salary for the last 8 years. And for me, you know, I'm in a very privileged position to be able to not have money as my first priority, because you've got to have enough to be able to have that mindset. But I also am happy to live quite simply. So, you know, I don't have to have the newest or the latest, or so in that way, I don't really miss it, because the flip side is that my life would be much more stressed and I'd feel much less healthy than I do now, physically, emotionally, and so on. And I am earning. So
Yes.
if I was teaching, I'd do it for less time. I'd retire sooner. So I would probably end up earning a similar amount to what I will working for longer, doing something that is you know, more of a healthy choice. So in that way, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Interesting.
You know, I'm not going to end up financially poorer. I'm going to end up much richer.
Richer in many ways.
Yeah.
Alex, thanks for sharing those websites with people. That's terrific. Thank you. Now
Thank
we're getting
you.
close to the end, but I'd just like each of the panelists to maybe just sum up 1 or 2 key messages that you'd like to leave people with. So over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I just like to place emphasis on it that senior entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship is a mindset. It's a way of doing business. It's not a business. It's just a certain target audience. And whilst I'd really like to motivate everyone to participate in startup activity because of all these advantages, the advantages certainly do outweigh the disadvantages. Just want to clarify again, entrepreneurship is not for everybody. It can be taught. We teach entrepreneurship to minimize the risk. So in other words, we teach the tools so that people can apply those tools, very much like Natalie was talking about design thinking. Things such as lean startup, business model canvas, that type of thing. That reduces the risk of the idea or the opportunity in launching that business. But network, mix with like-minded people, get yourself a mentor, get into that space, and you've got an 80% chance that you'll actually love it so much. Then again, the problem we do have is often these senior entrepreneurs do go into self-employment. And guess what actually happens? Their business starts growing quicker than they thought. Then their lifestyle isn't always such a lifestyle anymore. Their business takes prominence. But a lot of people say to me, well, that's a nice problem to have. So what I'm saying is just beware, you may just be too good at what you're doing because of your life skills. And often people go into senior entrepreneurship business from passion projects. Somebody mentioned it earlier on, things that they love. And they get so good at it, they become too good at it. And then it becomes an all-encompassing job. And never mind, well, there goes lifestyle. There goes work-life balance and so on. So just be aware of all those things, but see it from a positive perspective.
All right. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Natalie, 1 or 2 top tips from you as we
Yeah.
leave?
My advice is to really tap into the wisdom and knowledge that you've acquired along with the networks, because I don't think entrepreneurship is a solo pathway. The most successful ones are the ones where you're part of a community amongst people who are passionate about solving that market or social problem along with you, because there's going to be different times when you're going to need to reach out to people with different expertise, whether you're paying them to do it, like, you know, a designer, your accountant, like you don't want to necessarily be doing all that because that can be quite stressful to try and learn everything and do it all by yourself. And it's quite lonely as well. So just recognizing there's other people who may well want to join your journey, or if you don't want to start your own business, there are also entrepreneurs out there or businesses who would love to have someone come into their business and, you know, contribute, whether you join them as a mentor or an advisor. There's lots of different ways to be part of that whole entrepreneurial journey that you don't have to be the one to initiate. So sometimes joining someone else's already established entrepreneurship journey can be incredibly powerful, because it also means that you're not doing it by yourself. You're actually supporting someone who's aligned with you.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. And Jan, last words from you?
Yeah, look, I don't really have anything to add. I sort of, I have that imposter syndrome here that I'm not really an entrepreneur, but I hope that what I have been able to offer is maybe some hope to people out there to think that even if you're not going to create a huge idea, that there are ways to follow your interests, your experience and your dreams, and to get something started.
Great, thank you. So folks, stay with me just for another 5 minutes. It's just been a joy, and it's been a great learning experience for me personally and professionally. So to you, Alex, Natalie and Jan, thank you so much on behalf of all the people out there that you can't see. I'm sure we're very, very grateful for all of your thoughts and your encouragement. So thank you. Just everyone, Alex has sent, as we've been talking, there's been a whole lot of different websites, and Natalie has as well. So what COTA New South Wales will do, Megan, who's from COTA New South Wales, she'll collect all of those websites. So the email will go out tomorrow to all of the people who've joined us today, and then we'll just run a list of those emails so they're all in one place for you and you can refer to them. Now, because it was such a fabulous webinar, please share it. with other people. I think this has been such a great topic. And as I said, this will go on COTA New South Wales YouTube channel tomorrow or the next day, and you can share with your colleagues, friends and family. As I said in the beginning, we have these regular webinars. Conversations is another way that we talk about them, and we do between 10 and 11 a year. So that's monthly. Our next one is about the Dying to Know campaign. So we do that yearly. August is a time when it's a subject that we all need to talk with friends and family about. Jan's shared some of that with us today. So in August, it's Dying to Know Day, and we always have some great panelists to talk with you about how you start that important conversation with your friends and family, so that you have some choice towards the end of your life, and that you can have as dignified and respectful death as possible. So a great topic, difficult, but an important one. And just remember, we have a band of volunteer community speakers. They're all volunteers that work with COTA New South Wales, and they can go out to your groups and talk about a whole range of topics, from energy to death and dying to navigating the aged care system. So they're all trained and terrific people. And in a way, they've started something in this chapter of their life, in that they want to do something for COTA New South Wales and to share knowledge about topics that are important to people. Check out our website, or if you want to, you can give us a call. So thank you. How are we going for time? Oh, it's 2 minutes to 12. I'm even a little bit earlier. So thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you again to Alex, Natalie and Jan. It was terrific. I think we'll do one of these again, because there's probably some more topics now that people will think about that they would like to share, whereas we haven't done anything about this before. So stay well, everyone. Just remember that COVID is still with us. It hasn't gone. So try and do all of the things that are going to help you and your friend and family and neighbourhood and community to stay healthy. Get some of that sunshine. I'm sorry, Alex, has it started to rain in Melbourne yet?
No, it's not right. Not
Oh,
right.
good, good. So for people,
it will though. It will.
It will, yeah. And we've got some great feedback too that have come through the chat and the Q&A. People have found this really, really stimulating. So thanks to all of you out there. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you in August. Bye for now.